Good Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. So the Browns begin the offseason, day 2 of it, and working towards free agency, the draft. They have to find an offensive coordinator. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham from the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, I know you wrote an article, critical decisions the Browns need to make sooner rather than later. One of them is the starting quarterback, and we'll run through this just real quick from your article. Draft options, you got Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe. Fill in another guy in the draft. Free agency, trade options, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston among those. None of them are, it's not like there's somebody there that we're saying, boy, let's go get him because he'll solve everything. It's going to be an interesting offseason. They got a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah, they do, and it always seems to come back the same thing, the quarterback situation. And, and that's what it's so underwhelming when you look at the free agency list or things like that, because guys like that just don't become available if they're really good. At this time last year, Sam Darnold's one of those guys, and everybody's like, oh, no, he's a retread. Well, look what he did in the right situation. Is it him put in the right situation, and something had to happen? J.J. McCarthy had to get hurt. And then he leads the team to 14-3 regular season. It just shows you in a right system and so forth. Or is it because all of a sudden he figured out how to play quarterback? And so you look at the same thing, guys like Daniel Jones and Darnold, and is there another guy out there? Would Kirk Cousins, put into this system, reuniting with Kevin Stefanski, where he had a lot of success with Minnesota, would that make sense? That to me is the quickest route to turning things around, at least to having a feasible, competent offense, is just going back to the type of system that Kevin Stefanski has proven that he's good at. I mean, last year they averaged just under 24 points a game with 5 different quarterbacks. I'm talking about 2023. They felt that wasn't good enough. They needed to ramp it up with Deshaun Watson, build around his skill set. And what did you get? 15.2 points per game. That's not almost 8 points a game less. And in the NFL, where the average difference in a game is about 6 points or less, I mean, if you've dropped 8 points, you put yourself in a position to be 3-14. So, I mean, there's a start, getting a system that works. And that goes back to getting an effective running game and a lot of things. But they have to decide. Andrew Berry talked about in his final press conference, he alluded to Washington. They were in this situation picking second a year ago. After a 4-13 season, they draft Jaden Daniels. They made the playoffs. They look like a good team now. So the $1 million question is, who is the Jaden Daniels, and are you going to get that guy? Because the draft record, with Andrew Berry has not been good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm writing a story about that tomorrow, and I wrote some of it, last week. And what makes you think that the people in charge who thought they had the best roster going, are making these decisions? And so that's kind of what I'm saying.
It's absolutely a fair criticism. So it's kind of interesting. Jack Conklin, who was injured for about half of the year, then came back and played pretty well, on what the Browns need to do to basically create an identity.
I think it's just, creating our own identity, what this team needs. I think creating our own individual makes things tough for everybody else. I think you got to stick with what this thing is built around. If we can do that, I think we have a long success. Look at what we've done. I think I would say where we had our most success is, we're a wide zone team. We've brought in guys that do that and have been very successful at doing that. And I hope that's where we go next.
And Fred, that goes back to what you were saying, and you, again, kind of an article you wrote about going back to the future. Upon further review, building the offense around one individual, Deshaun Watson in this case, it's a bad idea.
He said that, Conklin did, in one of the clips. Probably the most straightforward elephant in the room answers that we've heard all year. Everybody kind of knows that, but everybody's dancing around it. Think about last year, in the offseason, they let go of almost all the offensive coaches, brought in 6 new offensive coaches. By the way, 2 of them already been let go. And the whole purpose was to put together an offense that worked with Deshaun Watson. And as Conklin said there, you can't build, I don't care who it is, you can't build everything around one individual, because if that one individual isn't available, you can see what happened. And even if he was available, you saw what happened. So I agree with Conklin. There's a lot of criticism about the offensive line, and they are getting older. But one thing you can't deny is that's what they were good at, is that wide zone under Bill Callahan. They know how to do that. And that was a strong running game. The first 3 years under Stefanski, they were up in the top 5 among rushing teams. Last year, I think they finished 11th or 12th, but they still averaged over 110 yards a game. This year, they dropped under 100, and they were, at the bottom. They were like 28th in the NFL in rushing. Now, a lot of that has to do with you lost a premier running back in Nick Chubb in those first 3 years. They dropped off in year 4, but I think, if you go back to that, I think you're going to get Joe Bitonio back, because he was one of the ones with Conklin kind of preaching to go back to that system. Conklin played well, and if you go back to that, let me put it this way, if you can fix and just get back to a dominant running game, I think that can make things a lot better all the way around, even on the quarterback. A guy like Jacoby Brissett looked pretty good. In fact, case could be made he played better and the offense looked better when he was a quarterback. We all know with Joe Flacco, and obviously with Jameis Winston, take away the turnovers. But I even say, in fairness, excuse me, to Jameis Winston, if you would have had a dominating running game, I think he wouldn't have had to throw 40, 50 times a game. And he even said that why were you so good in that limited time with the Saints? When he started those first 7 games after Drew Brees retired, the Saints were 5-2. He had 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That doesn't sound like Jameis Winston numbers. Why? He said he didn't have to throw the ball because they had a good running game. And that, to me, makes sense right there in itself. So don't, I know they tried to make it work with Watson. Obviously, it didn't work. It's time to get back to what Kevin Stefanski knows and what this offense can do. We've seen what they can do with a good running game and a play-action passing game.
I'm with you. And I think the other guy that helps is Wyatt Teller. You mentioned Joel Bitonio. I think Teller, get Teller out and pull in like that, like you do Bitonio, and I think that plays to his strength as well. Fred Greetham now, I guess. Step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back. Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Reports. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I don't know what you guys think about hiring Nick Saban as our head coach. Just a thought, if he would come. I'd like to know what you think. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, Nick Saban was with the Browns as a defensive backs coach under Bill Belichick. He's going to be 74 years old at the end of October. I think he's done coaching. I think he's really good on ESPN when they use him. I wouldn't be opposed to it, although 74 does give me pause for concern. You got to. Kevin Stefanski, I still think is a good coach, and I'm going to get crucified by some of our voicemailers about that. But Nick Saban's 74.
Yeah, I don't know about the age and all that kind of stuff, but I think when he decelerated and stepped down from, Alabama, it's a pretty pristine job, realized with NIL, you didn't have control anymore. I think he's got a pretty good gig. I think he's great in those commercials, especially the ones where it's like the Airbnb. I know that's not the right one, but deadpan comedy. And, I don't think he needs money. I mean, some of those guys are lifers, and you see with Belichick and so forth, but I just think maybe, he excelled in college, and all you can do at this point is tarnish your reputation. You don't have as much control over the NFL game. We saw Urban Meyer, and when he went to the NFL, not saying he's a bad coach, but it's a completely different animal. You can't control the roster. You can in college, you could until the NIL, but yeah, I don't really see that. I mean, everybody, wants to get a new coach, but it's who are you going to replace him with? I said it all along. You had a guy in the building who's highly sought after right now. We'll see what happens, but I think Mike Vrabel is going to have his pick of a number of jobs. I think he will end up with the Patriots, but if you really were going to make a change or felt that was the direction, that is your guy right there. The Browns situation, frankly, is not that attractive outside of maybe Cleveland, in my opinion, because you don't have a franchise quarterback.
Right.
The reason Harbaugh, I think, jumped on the Chargers because they were down and fired their coach because Justin Herbert was sitting there.
Yep.
And the Patriots drafted a kid last year, Drake May, they feel very good about, and that's very appealing to somebody, coming in. Usually head coach vacancies are because they're bad teams and they don't have a quarterback.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think you better be happy with what you have. I'm more concerned with the players and the acquisition and where you're going from here at the quarterback position.
Well, we alluded to this. So they fired the offensive line coach, Andy Dickerson. Offensive line took a step back without question. And they fired Ken Dorsey, the offensive coordinator. Tony Grossi, longtime Browns beat reporter, ESPN Cleveland, talked about kind of the profile that he thinks the Browns will be looking for with an offensive coordinator.
All of which leads me to believe it'll be a younger, unproven guy who will basically learn Stefanski's system under Stefanski's wing. And that points to like Clint Kubiak, okay, who's a very young man.
And Clint Kubiak's been in the NFL for, I think it's 3 years with the Saints. He was kind of interim offensive coordinator for the Saints after they moved on from their coach. Another guy that, is a guy that's on staff is Tommy Rees. So that's another young guy. Do you think they go young with the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think Kevin Stefanski, I'm reading between the tea leaves, that he's going to take back over play calling. A lot of people think that's what he does best, and he's almost like the offensive coordinator mindset. With that said, that is going to lessen the field, because to me, the most significant aspect of being an offensive coordinator would be calling the plays. I mean, that's kind of, where you cut your teeth, and that's how you get a head coaching job, is because your offense and you're calling the plays. So with that said, Alex Van Pelt was here 4 years. I'm not so sure that Stefanski really was on board with letting him go. He got let go by the Patriots. Somebody like that was content to be on the staff, be offensive coordinator, but not call plays, could be in play. But you mentioned Tommy Reese. I'm hearing we have a source at the OBR that says he's he's internal and he's the top candidate. He's being sought after for other positions. The biggest thing is to keep him. They probably would have to promote him to a position like that. But would he want to do it if Stefanski's going to call the plays? I think for the first year or being the offensive coordinator, he may be willing to do that. I also have heard that Mike Vrabel would like to take him wherever he goes. And so you might have to say, to Reese, if you really want to keep him, he has to be the offensive coordinator and he's going to have to call plays. I don't know how that'll play out, but as you mentioned, Kubiak would be somebody that Stefanski learned under his dad, and I think has some history there. But I don't think it's going to be some big name, because a big name, a head coach that gets fired, like a Doug Peterson, somebody like that, they want to call the plays if they're going to go back to being an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And Reese is intriguing. We'll hear he got a start as an offensive coordinator at Alabama a couple years ago under Nick Saban. A little later in the show, we'll hear what Nick Saban thinks about Tommy Reese, and it's kind of interesting. Myles Garrett made it clear a couple weeks ago, actually. He's not interested in being involved in a rebuild. He has 2 years left on his current contract, at about $20 million a year. He was asked after the final regular season game about a possible extension to that contract and his future with the Browns.
I think that's the best way to decide with anything, and make sure you remove yourself from the situation and try to look at it objectively, not just look at it emotionally. Obviously, emotions are high with how the season is winning. Guys don't feel very good about whether it's individual performances or the record, and you have to take a step back and allow yourself to decompress, and then make the best decision for yourself.
Is it safe to say that an potential extension this offseason would hinge on those conversations that you have with the higher ups?
There'll be something coming.
And Fred, a lot of people took it as Myles wants out of here. Myles basically said he doesn't want the roster torn down to the studs, because he went through what it was, 1-15, whatever, when he was first here. Andrew Berry made it pretty clear. He's going to be a Brown as long as they can get it extended out and it goes from Cleveland to Canton, meaning the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, you got your team's best player, basically holding the front office feet to the fire. I think he's well thought out what he's going to say, and I'm not saying he did this, but I think he knows also that he's got a lot of leverage, and I think an extension is coming before he even had to voice that something's coming. And I'm not saying he did that just to get the extension, but I believe that there's no way, they're going to let him go. And I think that he wanted them to say it to him and I think the big question is, what are you going to do at quarterback? Just like all of us ask those questions. Are you really going to keep throwing it down everybody's throat that the best option is Deshaun Watson, when anybody can clearly see, as I laid out before, Watson returned this year. We saw what the offense looked like under Joe Flacco after Watson got injured in 2023. And we saw what the offense can do after, Watson was injured this year with Jameis Winston. 3 wide receivers that you didn't think were very good or you weren't even sure about took off and blossomed, especially Jerry Jeudy, when you change quarterbacks. So, yeah, I think that was calculated. I think it's part of the whole picture. I think he wanted to hear what they had to say, and he wanted to know that, what are you going to do so we can win next year? And Andrew Berry talked about that, in his press conference, about what they can do to pivot and win next year. So calculated. He's going to get an extension out of this. Not that he wouldn't anyway, but he's not going anywhere.
No.
I mean, he's
No.
not demanding a trade. He just wants to win.
Yep. And you know what? He deserves the extension. They made him the highest paid defensive lineman a few years back, and he's probably outperformed the contract because relative to everything else, defensive ends and pass rushers have gotten paid more. Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I can step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break. Back to the voicemail of truth and reason and the team's biggest needs. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of truth and reason.
I just want to know, how come with our two-time coach of the year, he never gets blamed for anything? He always blames everybody else. He didn't even get the game over with, and he fires Dorsey. If he's supposed to be the head coach and he's got part of the say, then why isn't he fixing the offense with Dorsey? We are never going to win with a guy like that.
As always, we appreciate all of the voicemails. Fred, when I hear that, Dorsey was brought in to maximize Deshaun Watson's skill set, run more shotgun, run RPO, and it was a disaster. If you look at that and you think anything else, it didn't work. And, you know, the other thing that this tells me, the decision to, one, go out and get Watson and to continue to play Watson, they're going to say it was collaborative. That means everybody agreed to it. And I probably feel Kevin Stefanski agreed to it a little less than Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam, if you hold my feet to the fire on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I believe Kevin when he said it. You know, when we're watching him before he was injured, and they're 1-6, even when they're 1-3 or 1-4. To continue to say gives them the best chance to win. I don't think anybody bought that. And I think that's part of what Myles Garrett and some of the defensive people were even meaning by what's the plan. Because, I mean, they might be smarter about football than you and I are, Dave. But, I mean, I think we're not stupid. And you can't really believe that. Because especially after, you know, when Winston stepped in, say what you will, they averaged 300 yards a game passing. But I think the detriment was, like you said, with Ken Dorsey, it was a pass-first offense. And you really can't be throwing the ball 40, 50 times a game with somebody who's turnover prone in the passing game, especially when they got behind, you know, then he'd throw turnover or interceptions in bunches. So in fairness to Dorsey, you can look at that time. Why did the offense look so much better? You know, he was calling the plays and running basically the same offense with some changes. So yeah, it's a big picture thing. And I can only believe when Stefanski said it was his call, but I do believe they're all sitting in the room, and whoever says it, they all agree to it. So, but he said, okay, Kevin, you have final say. And he's like, yeah, we're going to stick with him, because I always said all along, and it's a moot point to ask the question after the season, but the season was over when you were 1-6. How long would Watson have started if he wouldn't have got hurt? Would he have still been the starting quarterback when they were 3-14? You know, you never know, but I didn't see a change coming. And I always said, why couldn't you use the baseball analogy of going to the relief pitcher? I'm firmly convinced if Jameis Winston would have stepped in 3 or 4 of those games as a spark, they might have won the Giants, Raiders, maybe even the Bengals game. when you look at that schedule, and even at the end of the season, I don't buy that DTR or Bailey Zappi gave him the best chance of win. And I don't know if Winston could have played or not, but you certainly could not tell me that they were not really trying to win those games at the end of the season, because with Winston, you knew one thing: you were going to move the ball and you were going to put up more points than what you did with DTR.
All right.
Zappi.
So that brings us to this. This is from the Bleacher Report. Biggest needs for every team entering 2025 offseason. For the Browns, it's pretty simple. Number one is quarterback. They say left tackle is 2, wide receiver is 3, running back is 4, and edge rusher is 5. How do you decide whether to take Sanders or Ward or whomever might be available at 2? You look at those. If you sub out cornerback for running back at 4, you've got probably the most important positions in football: quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, cornerback, and wide receiver. I think the offense needs an infusion of talent. I think the defense, the way it's constructed, can win and can be effective if you get an offense that isn't putting them behind the 8 ball every possession.
I said that all last offseason, that Watson didn't need to be a superstar. He just needed to be average, stay on the field and be average. For them to go to the Super Bowl, he would have to move up to being near elite by the end of the season, but they could get to the playoffs just with adequate quarterback play. And I stand by that. 23 interceptions and whatever, 10 fumbles, 32 turnovers or whatever it was. That's not going to win you any games. You are giving away points every time you do that. So there's several ways to look at this. Quarterback, to me, yes, is the most important, because you thought it was solved until it wasn't solved. It's obvious, and you can't win until you have adequate quarterback play. Now, how do you solve that? I think you draft a quarterback, and I think you also sign and get a free agent quarterback that can handle the offense. If you go back to the roots of what you did the first 4 years under Stefanski, more play action pass and the running game, I think you're other than some age, the offensive line, I think, is suited to play pretty well for the most part. You have a little question at left tackle. Can Jones handle it? But I think you're okay at the other 3 or 4 positions. So, yes, one way to look at it is if you drafted Hunter, from Colorado, you could solve 2 on that list, cornerback and wide receiver, if he played both ways. But you might want to look to trade down and get more than 1. If you don't think the quarterback there is an NFL top of the draft franchise quarterback. Personally, I'm not a scouting guru, but from what I've watched, the only one that I would take or feel that is that type of guy is Cam Ward. He's played a lot of games and so forth. But if they don't think he's ready to go, then you trade down to somebody that really wants him. But the one problem is with being the number 2 pick, if Cam Ward is the guy, the Titans will take him probably number 1. And so it doesn't matter anyway. Or somebody will trade up, ahead of you to get him. So we've been here before. Sometimes it takes luck. I talked to Daniel Jeremiah a while ago, and he didn't think there was a franchise quarterback in the draft. If that be the case, then you don't just take one to take one. And I don't think you get your franchise quarterbacks really unless you're getting lucky outside the first round.
Yeah, I'm with you. And now the other thing is, though, if there's a quarterback you like and you think you can develop, you take him later in the draft until you find that franchise guy. And I'm with you. I'd probably bring in 2 veterans just to make sure that you got to find a way to get competent quarterback play next season.
Well, that's why, if you're asking me, I would bring in Kirk Cousins and still draft one. And if it's even Cam Ward, kind of like what the Falcons did, even though it was like the 8th pick in the draft or 7th to get Penix, and Ward was there, okay. And that was your guy, you take him. or whoever it is, even Mueller in the second round or
Right.
whatever. But stability, I think you put Cousins back. He had an abomination of a season. Sometimes it takes another year off the Achilles, so he'd be there. And he's at home in Stefanski's offense. He wasn't with the Falcons. So maybe that could get you the stability for a year, and you got the quarterback in the future.
Fred Greetham, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Thank you, Dave.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Always really good stuff. We're steps aside, take a quick time out. Jared Mueller, Dawgs by Nature, straight ahead. Sports4CLE, will be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature. Jared, I know you wrote an article about Deshaun Watson, the injury setback, salary cap loophole, and kind of a clear path for 2025. So do we know the parameters of the finances of the insurance that they're looking at with Deshaun?
You know, it's an interesting little piece of the puzzle. We know that the Deshaun Watson contract has loomed over everything, right? And so earlier this year, Seth Walder at ESPN posted an article about the CBA allows for insurance claims. So if a team insures a contract based on injury, they allow that then the following year to provide some salary cap relief. Based on what the Browns insured last year, they got about $4 million in relief this year. Based on this year's injury, the expectation is that next year, somewhere between $29 and $33 million in salary cap relief for Deshaun Watson, which then means when we look at the information that we got from Over the Cap, which does a lot of the salary cap stuff, the Browns have insured next year's salary at $44.3 million. So why that's important is we start to add those numbers up. $4 million last year, $33 million this year, and then the potential for $44 million the following year. This new kind of setback injury could keep Deshaun Watson out perhaps all of 2025. And if that happens, based on what we understand from Seth Walder's information and a few other people have talked about this kind of CBA loophole, because the Browns have paid their insurance premiums up to $44 million, that means in 2026, what we have been worried about and all the stress around Deshaun Watson's contract, by the end of 2026 or by the offseason of the 2026, all of a sudden you're talking about somewhere between $70 and $80 million of salary cap space that no longer has been eaten up by Deshaun Watson over a 3-year span. And that is really significant given what we know about the $100 and some million that they owe on the cap for him over the next couple of seasons.
All right. So the Watson issue isn't going away. When you look at this roster and you take quarterback out of the equation, how good is it?
You know, I just heard Fred, a good friend of mine, talk a little bit about it as well. And I think the reality is it's a playoff level roster. I think there are some holes. But Kevin Stefanski talked as if DeJuan Jones is a left tackle. If that is true, it's a roster that really could be set up really quickly with some kind of stable quarterback. That's really going to be the key. Otherwise, when you look around the roster, you see a defensive line that has a lot of talent, some young players that are coming of age, that are developing over this season, really the last few games. The linebacker group is a little light. I know we'll talk about JOK here at some point. But then the secondary, again, there'll be some need for changeover. But on the offensive side of the ball, it's easy to find running backs. The Browns have wide receivers that can make impact plays. Cedric Tillman really missed the last half of the season with his concussion, so that's concerning. But Jerry Jeudy got an opportunity to show that he's at least a 1B level wide receiver. David Njoku, they really are set up to be back in the playoffs next year with some type of capable quarterback play, as well as they currently have the most draft capital of anyone.
Yeah, that, according to Tankathon, they're set up draft-wise. JOK, you mentioned him. How concerning is it? We really haven't had an update since we saw him go down in trying to tackle Derrick Henry and have the neck issue.
Yeah, I think there was a line, and I'm not going to be quoting directly, but there was a line by Kevin Stefanski that said something, I believe it was Stefanski, who said something about looking for all alternatives for treatment. That is a really concerning line. That means University Hospital, Cleveland Clinic, whichever, obviously they're a UH team, but that University Hospital and Cleveland Clinic may not have provided him with information that he liked. Now, whether that is, we know he is a strong faith-oriented person and he wants to go about maybe some different routes, or that is that they said there's no solution. It's really concerning because all we've heard is hopeful, maybe. He's going to be out this week. We heard he's going to be out this week, basically since the injury. And that, while the Browns are unique communicators, that is just not how they normally talk, right? They normally talk, this is a day-to-day injury, this is a week-to-week injury, they're out for the season, those kind of language. And with JOK, we just saw something different. And when there's something different, it raises red flags, especially when that something different is, for most of the season.
Yeah, and again, if he is unable to play, that's a gaping. I mean, there's Myles Garrett, there's Denzel Ward, and then there's JOK, and you can kind of merge them together with the way he was ascending. So I'm with you. I'm interested. We keep hearing, they're going back to the Kevin Stefanski system potentially. That's the tea leaves that we're reading. So system rather than player. And I was a guy that said, yeah, you got to try to maximize Deshaun Watson's ability. Man, that didn't work out. I'm the first to admit it. It was a disaster.
It really was. And listen, we get it. Like, maximizing someone's ability is really important. You want to put people in position to be successful. The problem was, especially with the Browns' offensive line, I always talk about the spread system. Offensive linemen need to catch defenders as they're coming. Well, the wide zone scheme and the players that the Browns have want to get out and move. They want to get players off balance. They want to kind of be a little bit more of the aggressor in that style. They're not really we're just going to catch you and we're going to contain you and we're going to control you type. And so while it might have been set up for Deshaun Watson and even Jerry Jeudy and the receiving groups, it wasn't set up for the offensive line. In the end, a lot of system versus talent conversation actually goes all the way back to Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. Both Baker and OBJ wanted a system with more flexibility. Baker wanted to take the ball, scan the field, look around, see everything, spread everybody out, and kind of play point guard. Beckham really wanted to adjust his routes on the fly, not be real specific in his routes so that he could be as explosive as possible. The problem with that is you have to be great on the same page and consistent for that to work. Otherwise, you have a much lower floor to your success, which we saw all year with Deshaun Watson. Really, most of the quarterbacks that the Browns put out there, Jameis Winston had some more success. So going back to system at some level raises the floor of performance. But unfortunately, there's a belief that there is a ceiling to some of that wide zone scheme and that it's a little easier to figure out in the playoffs. The Houston Texans made some statements about it. So really, if you're Stefanski and even Andrew Berry, next year, do you still try to go with talent base, or do you have a high floor offense that really focuses on timing, rhythm, details to try to save your job, right? To try to establish a culture. And then if you do get the right quarterback, if that's with the number 2 pick or, in 2026 or whatever that looks like, then hope that quarterback can kind of bust through the ceiling of that system offense.
Yeah, and you know what? That's an interesting dilemma. I think it's a little easier to go with the high floor, low ceiling when you believe you have a dominant defense, which if you don't put this defense behind the 8 ball, we've seen it can be pretty good.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, the other thing, and one of the things the Browns are sort of fighting, and I can tell you I've been told this at different times, the Browns, the move to Watson was really about making sure good didn't get in the way of great. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a great example of this, a really good franchise. Most Browns fans are like, I wish we were the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if you look at really their recent last 10, 15 years or so, they have been a good franchise with almost no chance at greatness over that extended period of time, but they're never bad enough to get the quarterback, to get the dominant player, to really kind of change the game. And I think that's kind of the concern with system over talent is, do you put too much of ceiling on it? But like you said, the defense, and to be honest, the NFL has slowly moved back to more run orientation and allowing the Derrick Henrys and the Saquon Barkleys to actually be impactful. I think it's a perfect time to make that move.
Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back.
Ted.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh,
thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back.
Has anybody seen my glasses?
We continue talking Browns with Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
How you guys doing? With uncertainty of bringing back Nick Chubb next year, we know we need a whole revamp of that running back room. I know the possibility isn't big, but what's the possibility of bringing back Kareem Hunt just as a veteran presence? Because he had a way better year with Kansas City than he did with us. And so all that talk about he didn't have nothing left in the tank, he wasn't good enough to make our roster. Well, he went to KC and showed out. So what do you guys think about possibly bringing him back if that's possible? Thank you. Have a nice day.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Jared, I think they're trying to get younger at that position, and I would never say never, but I don't know. My guess is he wants to go back to the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think, obviously I just wanted to look at the stats real quick. 200 attempts, 3.6 yards per carry in that offense. That's probably not, he's not getting that many attempts, and he's probably not getting the freedom that you get to be Patrick Mahomes' running back. I think the other thing with Hunt that we have to just be really honest with, and this is also goes with Stump Mitchell, is both of them were very willing to voice their displeasure. And the Browns as an organization are not big fans of things being leaked. So I think going back to someplace he's comfortable, Kansas City, worked really well for him. I do think in some ways he feels like he missed out on an opportunity to really cash in and really be that bell cow back based on his own behaviors off the field. And there's a part of him that always wants to have a bigger role. And so this year is literally the most carries he's had since 2017, his rookie season. So I think, trying to bet on somebody like that who wants to have a big role just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's a deep draft for running backs. You can get one third, fourth round. That'll be really good. So we get news that Tommy Rees, we've talked about him a little bit earlier in the show, will in fact be interviewed by Kevin Stefanski for the offensive coordinator position. Rees, a young coach, passing game specialist, tight ends coach this year, first year with the Browns. He was an offensive coordinator for both Notre Dame and Alabama, where he coached under Nick Saban. This is Saban's thoughts on Rees when he was on his staff.
Tommy's great. He's mature. He does a great job presenting to the players. He has good relationships with the players. He's very bright. He understands the game. He's a very good quarterback coach in terms of helping guys improve at that position, which I think is critical. We don't have any issues. He's very respectful of what we want to do and how we want to do it. And the guy's hungry, wants to learn. I think he's one of the brightest young coaches that I've been around for a long time.
And Nick Saban does not throw compliments like that around frivolously. As somebody who has been kicked out of 2 locker rooms by Nick Saban, I can tell you that firsthand.
Does that make you unique? Because that's something you need on your wall.
It just means you asked the wrong question at the wrong time.
That works. Yeah, I think Tommy Rees is going to be an interesting name. We know the reporting is out there that if Bill Belichick did not decide to go back to college, Rees would have been the head coach of the University of North Carolina. And so we know he's going to be a hot name. I've heard a lot of rumors as well as just kind of conversation with some people within the Browns organization that he is likely to be Mike Vrabel's offensive coordinator wherever Vrabel goes. Not for sure, but that is the likely expectation at this point. I think that's really interesting in that I don't think of Rees as a wide zone Kevin Stefanski scheme guy, but there are a lot of people that like a lot about him. And so I think that's what's going to be almost a difficult conversation for the Browns. Is he the right fit for offensive coordinator? Or is he a really good young coach that you don't want to lose? If it's the second, giving him the offensive coordinator job just so Mike Vrabel doesn't get him or some other team doesn't get him up as a coordinator this year, it just seems backwards, right? It seems like you're not trying to do what's best for the Browns. You're trying to get ahead of the game, keep a guy around. But if Rees is that good as an offensive coordinator, he's at maximum getting 2 years in Cleveland. So he is definitely someone that people really like. I'm just not sure he's the right fit for the Browns this year.
All right, so Browns currently have the 2nd overall pick. How do you decide whether you take the quarterback or trade back? What's the breaking point? There's 2 guys that everybody thinks are in the first round: Sanders and Ward.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. First and foremost, so I'm not deep into my evaluation, but Ward plays a more wide, open, flexible, unstructured game that I think the Browns are trying to get away from. So I think that is talent is one thing, the ability to play in structure is another. In the end, for me, it's very simple. What is my grade on Shedeur Sanders? Is my grade on Shedeur Sanders first round, top 15, top 10, top 5 grade? If it is, I am taking Shedeur Sanders, barring anything that we do not know. Off the field, I've heard nothing but great things about him. Hard worker, all that kind of stuff. Did really well despite a terrible offensive line at Colorado. If my grade is good on Shedeur Sanders, I am taking him, period, point blank. If it is not, I am telling everyone my grade on Shedeur Sanders is really, really high, and I am trading down because I don't think Ward is the guy. While Travis Hunter is a unique talent, we haven't had a cornerback or a wide receiver go number 1 or number 2 overall in a long time for a reason. There is positional value issues there, and there's a question of whether his versatility is the only, quote-unquote, only reason he's going to be a high pick. So for me at that point, I'm looking to trade down. There are a number of players, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, defensive end for Penn State, Michigan's Mason Graham and Will Johnson, defensive tackle and cornerback. There are a number of players that are worthy of being top 8 selections. That is about where I'm going to trade down in the process. There is some belief, especially with the Raiders just now firing their head coach. The Raiders, the Giants are 2 teams that seem desperate for a quarterback. So if I don't have that grade on Shedeur Sanders, I am auctioning that off to the highest bidder. The belief is that the Titans are going to stay pat. They're going to take their quarterback, which I think gives the Browns the most leverage. But for me, the grade is all that matters. If you have that higher grade on a quarterback, you take them if they fit your system and you don't look back.
So basically, it's got to be top 15 grade to take him second, is what you're saying, top half of the draft?
For me, it is. It's just from a valuation perspective, you've got to have that level of talent. And that's not about top 15 in this draft. That's a top 15 level of grade. I don't care that Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward are the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft. At one point, E.J. Manuel was the first quarterback taken, and he probably should have been a 3rd-round pick, but he was the best quarterback in that draft, along with Geno Smith, who went in the next round.
Jared Mueller, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jared.
Absolutely, Dave. Always good to see you, brother.
Jared Mueller, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. Dogs by Nature has a mock draft up, so take a look at that. Really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we turn our attention to the Cavaliers. Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Head.
Hi, Betty.
Oh no, you wrapped yourself into a daze.
Holidays.
You need a break, so I got you Ohio Lotteries Home for the Holidays and Merry Money Scratch-Offs.
You could win up to $500,000 or $1 million. Oh, thanks, hon.
And they have games on the back.
Has anybody seen my glasses?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Turn our attention to the Cavaliers, NBA's best record. They are on a 10-game winning streak. Tomorrow night they host the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have a 15-game winning streak. Let's welcome in Ethan Sands, Cavs beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So Ethan, doesn't get much better than this.
It does not. I mean, the amount of storylines in tomorrow's game are at an abundance. I think this is everything you can ask for from a regular season game. Number one offense versus number one defense. First time in NBA history, two teams on these kinds of streaks are matching up. But I think there are two important aspects to remember that were touched on in our discussions at practice today. First and foremost, while this may be a preview of the NBA Finals, it is not. It's a regular season matchup, and the Cavs are taking it as such. Kenny Atkinson even mentioned that there was a game earlier this season that the Cavs pressed too hard for, as it was a marquee matchup, and he didn't discuss or disclose exactly which game it was, but it ended up biting them in the actual contest, meaning they were not as fresh due to the amount of practice, film study, all the different things, all the different work that they were putting in for preparation. And I'll have to get into the second part a little later on into the show.
All right, so Darius Garland was asked about the lack of attention he's getting by the national media. Take a listen to this.
Don't know why. I wish I had an answer to that, because I think that we deserve to have the recognition for being the best team in the league. Especially with the group that we have, the brand of basketball that we play. I think it's really exciting. I think it's fun. I think it's actual great basketball, and it should be shown a lot more. It should be just really out there, in my opinion. But I guess a small market, that's the only thing I can really think of, to be honest with you.
So Ethan, I know you wrote an article about this. Take us through that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the second part of the game on Wednesday night that is really important for the Cleveland Cavaliers and also for the OKC Thunder. It's two small market teams finally getting the attention that they deserve. As we mentioned, the records that speak for themselves, but maybe more so for the Cavs side, especially when you talk about what the OKC Thunder were able to do last season in the playoffs and the recognition that they were getting in that aspect. But because of how much skepticism there has been surrounding the Cavs as a national level due to their lack of playoff success in recent years. But this is a game where two small market teams are the most watched show on prime time. And it was bumped up by the NBA onto ESPN today at practice. There were more people, more reporters, more cameras than there usually are for regular Cavs games or regular Cavs practices. So you understood the value of what is coming to today's game. But I mean, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell both talked about it because they haven't won anything. That's basically the only reason that they feel like they can't get the same kind of recognition, even though they deserve it. They have in their minds four different all-stars: Darius Garland, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, and they've shown it, right? We talked about it earlier, the best offense in the NBA going up against the best defense. So this is an opportunity for them to showcase that it's not a fluke. And that's something that has been kind of circulating in the post-game press conferences, as you saw in the shot from Darius Garland's interview. It's because of how they operate and how they are able to split the minutes so evenly. So many different players. They only have 3 players playing 30 or more minutes this season, while other all-star candidates are playing 35 plus. So you look at all of those different things. This is an opportunity for the Cavs to showcase that they are who they are, and not to prove anybody wrong, but just to prove themselves right.
So they're on their 73 win pace is what they're on. So they're starting to get compared to those Warriors teams, but their focus is on getting done what the Warriors couldn't. Again, another article. Take us through that.
Yeah, it's just interesting when you see all these different comparisons that are going to be made just because of what they're doing. And they're obviously 31-4 leads to a 72.6. So let's round up here, 73 win pace. I just think you see it when they play against these opposing teams. JJ Redick said it when they played on December 31st, that the Cavs, to beat a Cavs team, this Cavs team, teams have to play a near perfect brand of basketball to even compete. Then we talked about it again with Charlotte Hornets head coach Charles Lee before the Cavs game, and he said there's an adequate fear or a scariness to this team that's comparable to the 2015-2016 Warriors that won 73 games. Ultimately, they lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA Finals. Everybody remembers that story. Everybody understands how important that was to Cleveland. But Donovan Mitchell has mentioned it. Darius Garland has mentioned it. The 73 win pace, it's great. It's good. They'll enjoy it. But more importantly, they are focused on creating a different narrative for themselves in the playoffs, in the postseason, that shows that they are not just a regular season win team. And over the last 3 seasons, play-in, Eastern Conference first round, Eastern Conference semifinals. The next portion of that, the next step, is Eastern Conference finals. And the Cavs think that they can even make it to the NBA finals this season.
So this is kind of interesting. Now, a lot of people go with the plus minuses. You know, you can make them say whatever you want. But the Cavs have 4 of the top 10 in plus minuses. The Thunder have 3. Cavs, you got Mobley at number 2, LeVert at 3, Mitchell at 6, and Darius Garland at 9. So plus minuses, it's the amount of points that you give up and score when you are on the court. To have 4 guys in the top 10 in the NBA, that explains to you how they have the best record in the league. And it also shows you how good LeVert is playing off that bench as the 6th man, if you will.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that goes into the minute allocation that we've talked about a lot this season, and how Kenny Atkinson has used that to not only build confidence in his role players, but also to limit the amount of minutes that his star players are playing. Like I mentioned earlier, only 3 players are above 30 minutes per game this season. That's Donovan, Darius, and Evan Mobley. Jared Allen's still at 29 minutes a game. And I believe it was last week, Donovan played 26 minutes in a game, which is unheard of. He's playing 5 less minutes than he did average every game last season at this point in the year. And Evan Mobley touched on this, saying that he's in the best shape and feeling the best feeling the freshest that he's felt since coming into the NBA at this point into a season. And that's in comparison to what we talk about with the OKC Thunder team, who run their offense and everything through, say, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And it's interesting because Donovan mentioned this as well in his interview today, was talking about how the Cavs have been very cognizant about how they've operated their offense and how they've wanted to just spread the wealth and all those different things. And it's by design that the Thunder run their offense through Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because he is an MVP caliber player. And when you talk about their defense being something that's so potent, it kind of translates to get Shai the ball and get out in transition and all those different things, while the Cavs have different weapons where they can use them on the perimeter and they can get out in transition, but shoot from deep with anybody on their arsenal.
Should be a good one tomorrow night. I'm sure we'll be watching. Ethan, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ethan.
Thanks for having me.
Ethan Sands, make sure you're checking him out. Really good stuff. He is the Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.